In health coaching and beyond, Tim and I aim to mix up conversations between the two of us, chewing over hot topics, latest news, and emerging ideas, but also bringing you conversations with thought leaders and people we admire in the field of health coaching and beyond. People we hope will help you think well and spark interesting ideas for yourself. This week it's Tim and I, and we discuss a recent TV program on Channel 4. Dr. Rangan Chatterjee presented Live Well with the Drug-Free Doctor. The show had a real impact on us as it illustrated so many of the new ways of thinking and working in the field in health and wellness that we believe in. We've long admired Rangan's very popular podcast, Feel Better, Live More. As fellow GPs, we recognise his integrity and determination to seek out innovative ideas, but also to hold a careful rigour over the validity of the information he shares. 3 areas that they cover: chronic pain, metabolic health and depression, and how non-drug approaches are showing great effectiveness. We consider how health coaching can support adoption of these approaches and develop ideas from the show to consider social barriers that also may get in the way. It's never a one-size-fits-all approach. And while the stories on the show are powerful, everybody has a different story and needs a personalised approach. This programme's still available to watch on Channel 4 on catch-up, and we'd highly recommend it. Hopefully, after listening to our reflections, you'll be motivated to watch it if you haven't already. Hello, Tim. Nice to see you again. Here we are.
Hi, Ollie. Yeah, nice to see you. And also, just for the people who are not watching and just listening in, just to point out that I am quite well dressed today after being kind of, outed of the Christmas do with your Christmas hat. Here I am. I've got a jacket and a nice shirt. And what is that you're wearing, Ollie?
I think it's denim. But, I suppose that's the difference in us, Tim. You've always been smarter than me.
Good. Glad we got that cleared up. So today we're
Smarter
gonna
and suaver, just throw in.
today so much truth on this program. So today we're going to talk about Rangan Chatterjee's program, The Drug-Free Doctor, which was, it's got quite a lot of kind of press coverage as well, hasn't it? And lots of kind of reaction I've noticed on LinkedIn, lots of people chiming in terms of what they think about it. And I think it's been received quite well. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's unusual, isn't it, to be talking about a TV program. What's that program they have on TV where they sit and talk about TV programs? Can't remember what it's called now.
Gogglebox.
Yeah, so it's a bit like Gogglebox, isn't it? We're going to pick a program, but it did seem to be such an important program, didn't it? There's so much about it. I don't know about you. I found myself just thinking, yes, that's exactly what I think. Yes, that's exactly what we've been trying to do. So to have someone be able to get prime time TV space, absolutely fantastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think really important for, I suppose, for health coaches and health coaching that, here's someone who I suppose is really well respected and is a bit of an influencer in some ways, saying, actually, do you know what? The way that you are working and the things that you've been doing, that's absolutely on the money. That's absolutely the right things to be doing, especially when thinking about these big 3, I suppose, of the kind of diseases that are kind of affecting us, so the issues with metabolic health, depression, and pain. I mean, you couldn't get a program that has all 3. You probably have a program dedicated to each one of those. So actually just to have them all kind of rolled in, but focusing in, I think, really well on each one and what people can do for themselves. And I suppose for us thinking, okay, and how can health coaches support people to do that? I think that'd be really good to think about.
Yeah, really good. And it's, I feel quite a lot of kinship with Rangan, actually. I mean, we're a similar sort of stage in our careers, aren't we? He talked about having been a GP for 20 years, you and I, similar, 25, 23 years. And, that journey that he'd obviously been on as well, in terms of seeing that the best ways of helping people are often not the medical ways. You and I both know there are times when of course, you need to prescribe and you need to rescue people and you need to intervene. But actually, certainly in those big 3 conditions like chronic pain, metabolic health and mental health, it's the stuff people do for themselves that really matters. I mean, I've really respected, admired what Rangan's done through the media. His podcast has been fantastic, isn't it? Obviously, I'm sure ultimately we'll overtake him, but that's just we're just starting from a little bit behind, aren't we? But he's done an amazing job really at championing the ability for people to take the mettle themselves. And he talks about becoming architects of your own health, doesn't he? Really important sort of messages to get across in the public domain, and here it was in the public domain. So what were your reflections then, Tim? What stood out for you?
I suppose the main things were how empowered people were to start to take control back of their health. So it started with a person with diabetes, and of course, I think it was one of David Unwin's patients, and of course he'd worked really
Yeah.
hard, hasn't he, to kind of work with people with diabetes and reverse diabetes, so people then were medication free. And I suppose that was a really inspiring story of someone taking control, thinking, right, I've got to do something here. They'd managed to lose a lot of weight, really think about what they were doing in terms of their diet. He talked about time kind of limited eating, didn't he, between certain times, which again, I think lots of people do that intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
So again, I think the overall message was there's really simple things you can do that will support better metabolic health. And I thought that was
Yeah, it
really,
was lovely, wasn't it? No, I loved it, and it was great, wasn't it, to think seeing so many people we knew, David Unwin, Georgie Oldfield, it was brilliant, wasn't it? And I guess we've quietly been observing the work that David's been doing. We've been trying to reproduce it in our PCN, and I know, down at sort of in Freshwell, down in Essex as well, they've been doing a similar sort of thing, and we've been seeing it, this sort of quiet revolution. But it was wonderful to see it properly sort of showcased on a mainstream TV channel, wasn't it? And in a way that just it made a case for this being the new normal, didn't it?
Yeah, I noticed you said that quiet revolution, and I remember Howard Schubiner saying that, when he was talking about chronic pain, there's this
Yeah.
kind of this quiet revolution of people starting to think differently about how we support people to manage their own health and diseases, and
Yeah.
moving away from the traditional biomedical model and medications being the answer to people actually taking control back themselves and thinking a little bit about what they can do. But in order for people to do that, they've got to know some stuff, haven't they? They've got to have some penny drop moments which help them realize that they've got a contribution to make and they can start doing something.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know, seeing it actually, it's something, isn't it? There's something quite visceral about seeing it being presented to you on the screen like that in such a sort of professional and produced way. It almost started me to feel almost like it's almost unethical now for this not to become the mainstream and for us not to be more focused on this. And I think we're going to come to it a bit later, aren't we? There are obviously times when it's hard for people to self-manage and to take the lead, as Rangan's advocated. But, we really should be setting up our systems to pursue that as our main aim, shouldn't we? And the fact that it's still in the shadows, it's not the main way people work, it's not the main sort of delivery model of diabetes care or chronic pain or mental health. It does feel like it's starting to become unethical to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, yes, I absolutely agree. And I think some of the things that we've taken as truth over the years and what we've relayed to patients, in good faith,
Yeah.
that their depression is due to, a deficiency in chemicals in the brain and serotonin. And so what we need to do is to give you this medication that will kind of make it up to kind of normal levels. And then your brain will kind of gradually recover. That's a story I think I've been telling in previous years as a
Yeah.
GP. And people have been accepting that that's the truth. That's why we need the chemicals to replace the ones that are deficient. And that's not true. So, and again, with chronic pain, we need to have a painkiller, a strong painkiller to deal with this strong pain, or we have to have some other intervention like a spinal injection or burning the nerves or something for this condition, which actually is being generated in the brain, not the same as being all in your head, but generated in the brain. And if we are able to kind of share the truth, the new pain science with people, then like the person who was in the program, who was, I think, actually quite activated, they were looking for the answer. They were looking for ways to help themselves, I think. But actually, every time they turn they took, they were just met with this kind of biomedical way of doing stuff, which didn't work at all. Of course,
Yeah.
it wouldn't.
Yeah.
So yeah,
There was so much in that, wasn't there? So many places we could take this. I think one of the things that struck me was the power of storytelling from patients and the importance of lived experience to transform the way we practice. And you're right, though. I mean, Fiona, who told her story, didn't she? She sort of told of almost a sort of like a penny drop moment for an almost sort of an overnight transformation of her symptoms and her condition, didn't she? And I think we certainly have had experience of supporting people in chronic pain. That's been our big area of interest, isn't it? And we've seen people where that's happened, absolutely. But of course, that's not the most common transformation that happens. You typically find, don't you, that people learn the message gradually. They go through a process of readjusting. They learn new skills and new ways of thinking, and things gradually unwind. But nevertheless, there's huge changes, and they do seem to be far more significant and more meaningful changes than we ever see with medication. So it was wonderful to hear those stories told. Every story is going to be different, isn't it? So you also don't want people to lose hope if they think, well, that person's story is not the same as my story. So it made me think of the power of storytelling, but also the risk of people thinking, well, if she did it, why hasn't it happened to me? It's holding that hope and optimism, but also knowing it's going to be different for everybody, I think.
Yeah, agree. And that's really important, isn't it? Because what we don't want is people feeling like kind of guilty almost that they're not recovering in the same ways these other people have managed to take control and recovered. And I think there's other things that mean that it is more difficult for some people to kind of take those steps. And I think we talk about activation quite a lot. People's confidence, knowledge, and skills to manage their own health.
Yeah.
And maybe people who are more confident, more knowledgeable, more skillful, it is more straightforward a movement to make. But actually, people who are less confident, less knowledgeable, less skillful for all sorts of really good reasons, it's going to be more challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think that's hard to capture everything in one program, isn't it? But for me, I agree with you. That's a key thing, isn't it? That if you're going to support people to take this self-care journey and to kind of learn new skills, which, let's face it, is hard work, isn't it? It's probably easier to take a pill and to be fixed medically, isn't it? But it's not as effective. So we need to get really good at supporting people in the way that they need, at the pace that they need, at the stage they're ready for. And I agree with that. I guess that's one of our USPs, isn't it? Around understanding people's activation, their skills, knowledge and confidence, but then knowing how to support them in the right way depending where they're at. So Fiona's story where she was highly activated, it was probably just having the right information and I guess building her optimism, sense of hope. And she was away, wasn't she? Whereas for other people, that will be incredibly scary. I think it's interesting, isn't it? I've seen a lot of vitriol. In fact, I know Fiona, for instance, she had chronic pain, but also chronic fatigue along with it. So often they go together, don't they? And she's had a huge amount of vitriol on social media because people are saying, it's not fair that you're saying it's a curable condition. And with it, there almost goes a blame that it's your fault. And if you're not recovering from it, it's because you just not done the right thing. So I think there's a real important distinction here, isn't it? Is to saying, yes, it's possible to recover from these things, but you do need the right support. And I think the prompt to us as an NHS or as a society is to recognize that and to be focused on giving the right support.
Yeah, I agree. And I suppose the same would go for mental health and depression,
Completely.
anxiety, people feeling like, oh, right, okay, so what you're saying is I've got to sort it all out. But I hope that's not what's coming across from the program. And certainly it would be what we would want to get across, because I think it's really hugely challenging for people. And I think the program was trying to kind of say, look, medication can't be the full answer. It can't be the whole answer. It can't be everything.
Yeah.
There is definitely something that we can do ourselves, however small. I mean, I noticed the chap with his depression, anxiety, that, just taking those short walks initially. I mean, again, I suspect most people don't want to necessarily be doing that, or for all sorts of reasons. Maybe there isn't any green space around them. I mean, that's the other thing. But it was quite profound in terms of the evidence base for that, wasn't it? Kind of getting out in walking and also getting out in nature was quite was quite overwhelming, I think.
And of course, ice baths as well, Tim. That cold water therapy. Is that something you've ever tried?
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say, I don't know what I prefer. I mean, opening kind of ice and sitting in this bucket as opposed to swimming in some cold water outdoors. I think maybe I'm maximizing everything there. But what
You
was
are.
interesting was about, it was almost emphasizing the mindset things. Like, if I can cope with this, then actually that's a kind of a tick in the box of, resilience, I suppose.
Yeah.
It is kind of that initial getting into the water and knowing that you've done it. Do you mean that's the thing? You should have seen this, with the snow it has been, and there was kind of a lot of kind of ice melt, and the river was flowing really quite hard. There were three of us middle-aged men clinging onto the banks, trying not to get washed down river. So I don't know what the cortisol levels were doing there.
So do you think regular listeners have got the fact that you are a cold water swimmer, Tim? Because I have to say, every Monday morning, seeing that little smug look on your face as you come in, and it's obviously you're getting the kind of dopamine surge and the resilience, and for you, it serves a great purpose, keeping you happy, keeping your mental health good.
Yeah, and you get to look smug. So it's ticking lots and lots of boxes. Yeah. I think I mean, it serves lots of functions, doesn't it? There is that kind of that is getting into the cold water, but then it's also doing it with other people, which I would
Yeah,
also recommend. Do it with other
for
people.
sure.
But I think that's a really important part of my week. It is kind of just checking in with each other,
Yeah.
getting in, having that experience that together, and yeah, having a bit of a conversation. Yeah, so if it doesn't come up in future podcasts, I mean that's fine. I suspect it will though.
Yeah. We'll play it down. So yeah, no, it was lovely, wasn't it? That was the key theme of the program, wasn't it? Really, that there are a whole load of non-medication, non-medical things that are incredibly effective at some of the most common things we're seeing, and some of them, the things that we've traditionally thought are incurable, like type 2 diabetes. Who would have thought? With the right support, actually, we can reverse it. We can take you out of type 2 diabetes range. The chronic pain that's traditionally been thought of something you just got to live with, we can now hold optimism that with the right support, you can live without it, or certainly you can get your pain back to normal levels. We all live with some degree of pain as a useful signal for us. Can we get people back to pain being useful rather than being overwhelming? And the same with mental health. So Rangan did a fantastic job, I think, of making the case for that. I think what we're leaning towards, isn't it, is that, it is having the skill and the capability to support people well. And I guess that's where we would see health coaching coming in, isn't it? As being one of those skill sets that we think can sit alongside this.
Yeah, agree. And Rongan at the end of the program was saying, it's like, what will your story be? What will you do? And I suppose that's, for some people that can be quite, we can't just go straight into that. It's almost like it's all over to you. And I don't think we will be in that space. But I think it's an invitation, isn't it, for people to start to think. And I suppose when we do training for health and social care professionals, what we're asking them to do is just bring that type of conversation in alongside and within the work they're already doing. It's not like we're chucking everything out. We're
Yeah.
kind of going, actually, as part of your conversation with people, provide an environment where they can start to think about it, but also ask them questions that invite their input,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
suppose, along that way, because that's what we need to do, is to invite people and then build their confidence with their own thinking.
Yeah, no, it's true, isn't it? And programs like this, it kind of helps people to, you've got to believe it's worth it, haven't you? Do you know what I mean? To even do that, to start those skills, to start inviting people. And of course, as a healthcare professional, you're always having to make choices, aren't you, about where you go with your time, where you go with your conversation and your support. And I guess what this is hopefully doing is saying, yeah, there may be times where you need to prescribe medicines and you need to take the lead in treatment. But actually, increasingly, maybe we should spend more of our time on building patient autonomy and agency and control, and doing that in a way that we know is going to be most effective. And I, like you, I think, believe that health coaching skills are the skills that help you to enact that way of working in the most effective and the most efficient way.
Yeah, agree. And it's a great kind of invitation, I think, for people to consider having health coaches as part of the professional team to
Yeah.
support people, because however we want to use these skills, embed these skills with healthcare professionals, and we absolutely need to do that. We also need people where it's their dedicated role to support people in these really big areas,
Yeah,
metabolic
yeah,
health,
yeah.
mental health, and chronic pain.
Yeah.
So if we're, I suppose, if we're thinking about what the future health kind of service needs, it's more of those people. You don't need to be medically qualified, I don't think, to do some of the work that David Unwin does. That
Yeah,
you
well,
need to be
it's
a
a mix,
coach.
isn't it? I mean, I think it's a mix. It really illustrates beautifully, doesn't it, the kind of the power of a multidisciplinary team. But I think we both agree we've neglected the part of the multidisciplinary team that encourages the patient role and supports the patient role. But I wouldn't want to be without it. I mean, certainly myself working as a GP now, I spend most of my time in long-term condition clinics with people with predominantly type 2 diabetes and chronic pain, actually. And most of my role is to rule out medical action that needs to be taken, or at least when it does need to be taken, highlight it, see when prescribing is useful, but also to give sort of permission to sort of say, well, in your type of condition, the majority of the effort and attention should be spent on helping you to live well with this and to live in a way that is going to help you to recover from this. That usually entails me then saying it's not going to be me that's going to do that. It's going to be a health coach with all the health coaching skills. And let's face it, the time that they've got, GP's time is expensive and probably best for that diagnostic sort of decision making. But actually, when you need the time and support that health coaching requires, then actually it's a different sort of support, isn't it?
Yeah. That reminds me a little bit of, again, of the importance, in chronic pain of the medical person to make the diagnosis of chronic pain.
Yeah,
That's really important, and exclude structural problems, which
yeah,
actually do need to be addressed with a biomedical kind of intervention.
sure.
Whether that's kind of an operation or a medication treatment or something else, you do need someone who is able to look at the whole picture and go, actually, no, I think this fits much more with a chronic neuroplastic pain situation. And actually, in this particular instance, you'd be much better off with such and such,
Yeah,
which
it's
would
interesting, isn't
probably
it?
the pain reprocessing therapy and that kind of approach, which again, I think we can train people to do that. I think it is a skilled thing, but I think we can definitely train people to do that work. It probably
Absolutely.
won't be
And of
medical
course,
people.
well, and also from our experience, peer support is really valuable in this space, isn't it? It was came across, I think someone said in the program, isn't it? This is not rocket science, or I might have seen there's been loads of chatter about this program on LinkedIn, isn't it? I think someone said this is not rocket science. Maybe making the diagnosis is important, ruling out other things, that might be a bit more complicated. But once you know that you're working with something where lifestyle and self-management is the key part, maybe the support comes from other patients like you, and maybe that's actually more effective. We've certainly been using that in our primary care network in Sheffield, and we've got 6 trained up peer support volunteers, patient peer support volunteers, and they've been fantastic. They I think they turn people around and help people feel it's doable in a way that I never could as a doctor. There's something about Frank saying I used to be 6 stone heavier. When I got on an aeroplane and tried to put a seatbelt on, I couldn't get it round me, and I know how embarrassing and sort of like, degrading that feels, and that sort of, I don't know, that sort of camaraderie, that sort of empathy is really well received, I think, and is a really good lever in it. So I think teaching people health coaching skills as peer supporters is a way to go as well.
Yeah, in fact, I saw Frank in the supermarket today. I was just going off to deliver this training, and I saw Frank, and he wished us well with what we were doing. He's listening in. So he may be listening in now,
It
but
might be.
again,
Well, dude, Frank's been one of my strongest collaborators over the years. The patients that have. I mean, I have to really put a thank out to him, people like him, and to Elaine and to David. Iftikhar, Stuart, Liz. These are people who are proactively giving their time to help other humans live well and flourish. And there's something really humbling about that. It's beautiful. They're volunteers. They do it off their own back. I hope they get something out of it by the feeling that you're helping and supporting and giving. It's actually quite empowering for you as well, isn't it? But people nevertheless give it. And it's just lovely when you see that. And it's just so effective.
yeah, and it's that kind of working in groups is definitely effective. It's also efficient because you're working with a group of people rather than just one on one. I think, but yes, I think it's Jane Raworth who teaches on our groups program, and she says, when someone has a light bulb moment one to one, that's delightful, that's lovely. But when someone has a light bulb moment in a group, it shines much brighter. And I think that's the important bit of groups, isn't it?
Yeah,
People
yeah.
just see what's going on for other people and they learn from each other, which is, yeah, particularly delightful. And I suppose, yeah, I imagine groups would work in all of those different areas, thinking about it, with the metabolic health and with the mental health and with chronic pain as well.
Yeah, when you turn your attention to it, there's so many ways we can do this in a sort of clever, sort of multimodal way, isn't there? I mean, we're going to talk about this in another podcast. I got no doubt that AI is going to play a role here as well, and some of the digital automation we're already seeing is having a great effect for people when they're in the stage to accept that, and when it works for them. It's not going to work for everybody, but group work won't work for everybody. But like, I guess finding the right sort of tool, the right ingredient for that person at the right time, that's a skill and an art in itself, isn't it? But it's so exciting because there's so much emerging in this space that is going to be useful. It's just so good to see that light shone on it as being important, isn't it? Once we know it's important and it has a key role to play, then we can put all our imagination and innovation around to delivering it the best way we can.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought in about personalization, because that's what we've been about, hasn't it? Really, for all the time that we've been working, and also kind of, I suppose, for me, since leaving general practice, is all about personalized care, and we think it's the health coaching part in some ways, the health coaching skills, the mindset, which is the golden thread that goes through all of that we advocate so strongly for. So it feels to me like there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do because we've got to kind of, I suppose, change people's or address the fact that people have been having had incorrect information on some
Yeah,
of
yeah.
these conditions. Diabetes is that's it, long-term conditions, no way back. Chronic pain, you've got to learn to live with it. And depression, well, that's just one of those things, here's some pills and da 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 dum. That's kind of your lot. And I think that's maybe a bit harsh, maybe, but that's maybe the messages that have been getting through. And so we've got some work to do to change that message to one that's being a little bit more hopeful, whilst holding the fact that actually for a lot of people, they're not able to hold that hope for themselves at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you draw attention to a really important area, don't you? Like, where do you get your information from? What do you trust? And I think in a way, that's another feature of this program, isn't it? Here's Rangan, who's a qualified GP. I think he's undoubtedly a major influencer now, isn't it? We've got to be hugely grateful for him for the way that he's attracted attention to the things he talks about. But equally, he's a trustworthy source of information. I think there was a piece in this week's British Medical Journal about influencers being a real risk to the type of health information we take on board. People are going onto TikTok and Instagram, and they're hearing information from influencers who are not giving information because they care about you or because they even have researched the topic. They're giving you information because it drives clicks and it drives popularity and builds their profile as an influencer. So there's something about being really wary about where we get our information from. And for me, appreciating people that I really do trust, making an effort to be an influencer and to be out there.
Yeah, and putting together a program which really, it felt like, handled those really challenging kind of situations really well. It wasn't kind of going right out with the old, in with the new. This is what you're going to do now, but really being quite gentle. I think it did a really good job of that.
Yeah, it was a lovely program. But the final thing that I would sort of say that, again, I was just thinking, your social situation will be very important, again, in how able you are to engage in looking after yourself, won't it? I think, again, I'm sure, I know Rangan's very aware of this, but, a lot of people living in food poverty, a lot of people, where there are other important factors of life crowding in. Your job, looking after your family, looking after your kids, your mental health is overwhelming, you have addiction problems, all sorts of things. You're living with neurodiversity. There's all sorts of complications that come in. So we shouldn't belittle the range of support that can help both health and social. I think that social aspect, again, they didn't have enough time to cover it, but I think it's important to keep in mind as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Again, it reminds me, that the combi model. If we want, people kind of changing their behaviors, it's fine, isn't it? If they've got the capability to do it and they've got the social, they've got the opportunity to do it as well. And it's not just that people aren't motivated. Do you know what I mean? They need those other factors. They need the capability and they need the opportunity to make the changes. And again, that's a lot about those wider determinants of health, isn't it? That kind of,
yeah, we still often forget that, don't we? We can build, I guess, with health coaching, we can build the capability and perhaps the motivation, but we also need to be mindful of the opportunity that people have and the restrictions they have on their ability to join in and participate, don't we? But I think what it just undermines, isn't it, is that a really good health service covers all those things. You build people's capabilities, you're mindful of their social situation. And it slightly distresses me, really. I was so enthused for the personalised care approach in the last 10-year plan, when PCNs brought in social prescribing link workers, they brought in health coaches to build people's self-management skills and coping and motivation. And, they brought in care coordinators, again, to try and help people navigate the health, the social, the self-care, the complexities of it all. There was a real focus on that, and I was really excited by that. And I am a bit disappointed that things seem to have sort of retreated back a little bit. I'm hoping it's just because the NHS is reorganising and, there's some challenges around funding, and there's some challenges around other urgent things like waiting lists and recovering after the pandemic, getting back to normal, some political pressures around that. But I really hope the NHS gets back to its focus on person-centred care, and as illustrated by this programme.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe that's going to be our word for 2026 is hope. Maybe that's it.
It's a good word to keep going with, isn't it? Certainly this programme, patients were illustrating hope anyway, weren't they? That was a lovely part of it. And Rangan too.
Yeah. So anything more to say about that programme, kind of the drug-free doctor? Anything more to add before we close, I suppose?
I hope we have more programs like that. I mean, I saw a lot of chatter. I'm on a WhatsApp group with a group called the British Society of Mind Body Medicine. And I think, it just illustrates there are a growing number of really thoughtful healthcare professionals out there where this sort of approach, it's not news to them. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It just goes, this is what I've been doing for a long time. I know it works. It's wonderful to have a spotlight put on it and profile raised, because in my heart of hearts, I know this is how it works. So I think it's just great to see so many people are taking this on now. It really is a social movement that's gathering momentum, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. And again, Howard Schubina's words about this quiet revolution. It's about time we turned up the volume, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, I like to think we're part of this quiet revolution, and maybe we're hoping to make it a bit noisier as well.
Yeah, indeed.
Great
Good.
chatting, Tim.
Yeah, nice to talk to you, Ollie.
Cheers.